quienes se acercan para hacer familiar junto a la gentleman right here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Can you get a good photo of everybody?
One more here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
I'm running at the pace of these people. And then you drink coffee too. That's right. Oh, coffee's good here. So good.
Good morning. Welcome to the America's Counter Cartel Conference, hosted by the Secretary of War, the Honorable Pete Hegseth, and the Commander of the United States Southern Command, General Francis Donovan. We thank you for traveling to be here with us for this historic convening. The America's Counter Cartel Conference is a testament to our partnership and this administration's unwavering commitment to secure the U.S. homeland and our hemisphere. At this time, I'd like to introduce the Commander of the United States Southern Command, General Francis Donovan.
Buenos dias. Welcome to Doral, the United States Southern Command, for the America's Counter Cartel Conference. It was a pleasure to meet many of you last night at the reception, and even better to see many of the friends and teammates we met last month at the CHODS conference in Washington, D.C. Secretary Hegseth, sir, thank you for hosting this vital gathering and your enduring leadership. Each day, you're ensuring the security, stability, and prosperity of the United States and the entire hemisphere. I'd also like to welcome and thank the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Assistant to the President of Homeland Security, Mr. Stephen Miller. The Undersecretary of War for Policy, the Honorable Eldridge Colby, who will be joining us virtually today. The Chief of the National Guard Bureau, General Stephen Nordhaus. Spock, thank you very much for being here. The Assistant Secretary of War for Cyber Policy, the Honorable Catherine Sutton. The Acting Assistant Secretary of War for Homeland Defense and the American Security Affairs, and my now best friend, Mr. Joseph Umar. The Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of War for Homeland Defense, the American Security Affairs, Mr. Mark Dibleson, and the Senior Advisor to the Secretary of War, Mr. Eric Garrissey, Mr. Patrick Weaver, and Mr. Philip Hegseth. And welcome, most importantly, to all of our partner nations' ministers, ambassadors, and leaders joining us today. Thank you all for being here. Today we stand together at a very critical moment. Narco-traffickers, drug cartels engage in campaigns of terror, violence, and corruption to enrich themselves and expand their insidious influence. They are poisoning and killing all of our nation's citizens. These sophisticated networks flood our streets with fentanyl, cocaine, and other drugs that kill at a higher rate than any conventional war. This is the single gravest threat to security in our region and across our hemisphere. To counter this threat, the United States is guided by the strategic vision of peace through security, set forth in both the United States National Security Strategy and the National Defense Strategy. These documents give our military a clear mandate in the Western Hemisphere to defend the U.S. homeland and increase burden sharing with our allies and partners to do so. We are your premier partner to work with, by, with, and through your nations to achieve shared objectives. But when necessary, we will not hesitate to act. Operation Southern Spear and Absolute Resolve are proof of this commitment. Through these efforts, the United States is combating narco-terrorism and drug trafficking and, most importantly, restoring deterrence. The Western Hemisphere is our neighborhood, and the narco-terrorists who seek to export drugs and death to our shores and your shores will be dismantled and defeated. As allies and partners, we must take aggressive action together, sharing the burden through cooperation. We now call upon our long-standing relationships built on a foundation of trust and linked through shared culture, history, and economic aspirations to unite for the benefit of all of our nations. Our mutual security is at stake. Through combined operations, training, exercises, and intelligence and information sharing, we will achieve greater domain awareness, interoperability, and capacity to strengthen regional security. With all nations shouldering this burden, our collective resilience will prevent shared adversaries from using the region to further their maligned agendas. The time is now. Today marks the next step towards moving out to deter and defeat those who threaten the security, stability, and prosperity of the United States and this hemisphere. We all face these threats, and the most effective way to counter and eradicate them is by standing together. Before I turn the stage over to Mr. Humar, I'd like to once again thank you for your stalwart partnership. Your participation here sends an unmistakable message to partners and adversaries alike. We are taking the fight to the narco-terrorists and the cartels. Not only are we redoubling our commitment to defend the sovereignty and security of our nations, we are doing it together to realize our common vision of a safer, stronger, and more prosperous Western Hemisphere. Let's get to work.
Thank you, General Donovan. Ladies and gentlemen, performing the duties of Assistant Secretary of War for Homeland Defense and America's Security Affairs, Joseph Humire.
Good morning. Buenos dias. And I'd be remiss if I didn't begin by thanking my new best friend, General Donovan, for your excellent remarks and frankly, for your excellent teamwork here at SOUTHCOM. Your team has truly been amazing at putting all this together in just a matter of a few weeks. So thank you, General. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging a special team of senior advisors and defense officials who, if not for their efforts, and not just today, but over the last several months, we frankly just wouldn't be here today. So a special thank you to Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary Divelson, Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary Strasbaugh, Mr. Eric Garrissey, Senior Advisor Mateo Haydar, and a special sincere and heartfelt thank you to Senior Advisors Philip Hegseth and Patrick Weaver. If it wasn't for you, frankly, this would not have happened. To all our interagency friends and foreign partners, this is truly a historic moment for the United States, for the Western Hemisphere, and for the world. In the room today, we have senior leadership from the Department of State, Department of Homeland Security, National Security Council, Homeland Security Council, Office of National Drug Control Policy, Office of the Vice President, and of course the White House. I'm honored to be here with you today as Secretary Hegseth, Acting Assistant Secretary of War for Homeland Defense and the Americas. Welcome everyone to the first America's Counter Cartel Conference in history. Every morning before I enter the Pentagon, I say a prayer in my car to our Heavenly Father, and I do this because I'm blessed. I'm blessed to be able to work in a once-in-a-lifetime administration, to work for a once-in-a-generation leader, President Donald J. Trump. And frankly, if it wasn't for President Trump, none of us, including our foreign partners, would be here today. President Trump, Secretary Hegseth, Mr. Stephen Miller, our leadership today understands an empirical truth that all the leadership of the United States missed for decades, if not centuries. They missed the fact that the Americas is an extension of U.S. homeland defense, that hemispheric defense is a part of U.S. homeland defense. And this statement of fact is now reflected in U.S. policy through the 2025 National Security Strategy and the 2026 National Defense Strategy that correctly places the Americas as a regional priority. Just think about where we were a little over 1 year ago today. And those of you that know me know that I've been working and studying on regional issues for more than 20 years. So I can confidently say that in 2024, prior to President Trump, I had never seen the Americas in worse shape. Prior to President Trump, there was record-breaking illegal mass migration that was collapsing our border and many of your borders as well. There was record-breaking deaths of Americans from deadly drugs that was transiting through your countries and stealing your sovereignty. The explosion of transnational organized crime in every single country throughout the Americas was destroying our shared region. If you think about it, before President Trump, we were breaking all the records for all the wrong things. And it was even worse because there was a growing false narrative throughout the region that was taking hold that said you cannot win a war against major cartels and gangs because they are too powerful. In some cases, and even in some countries, frankly, they were giving up and adopted a posture of, if you can't beat them, join them. That's not tolerable anymore. Not for the United States, not for your countries, and not for our neighborhood. If you look to your right and you look to your left, you will find partners that are willing to fight with you. And if we collectively fight together, there is no gang, there is no terrorist, there is no cartel that is more powerful than us. We are here today because each of you has committed to doing your part. And that commitment cannot just be lip service. This must come with a new approach and a new normal to dismantle and destroy our shared threats of cartels and narco-terrorism. There'll be a lot of discussions today on a myriad of topics, but I really want to quickly emphasize two that are central to this effort: border security and deterrence. If you do not control your borders, you do not have a country. Border security and territorial integrity, as President Trump has shown, is possible. Since 1948, since the Peace of Westphalia, sovereignty has been the bedrock of human flourishing. You do not have a democracy if you do not have your sovereignty, and you cannot have sovereignty without borders. Open borders make transnational organized crime fundamentally transnational. And you do not combat transnational crime with transnational institutions, you fight it with borders and national sovereignty. If we remove the transnational from transnational organized crime, it becomes a local problem, becomes a solvable problem. The second point is on deterrence. Interdiction, while necessary, is not deterrence. Dialogue, while useful, is not deterrence. Failing to control your prisons, your borders, or your waters is not deterrence. Going on offense is deterrence. Operation Southern Spear shows that the deterrence is taking lethal and bold actions, and our goal is for every partner in this room today to start leading deterrence-focused offensive operations against your cartels. And finally, to wrap up, I want to make a point about geography, because geography in this hemisphere is indispensable to security. I mean, the secret sauce of Latin America and the Caribbean to be a regional priority for the United States, it's not the size of your trade, it's not your populations or your military, it's because we are always going to be connected because of our shared geography. The United States understood this going back to 1815, when two leaders in a relatively young Department of War pushed back against their own establishment at that time, not to look north or to look east, but rather to look south. The Department of War back then fought and won the Battle of New Orleans in 1815 that connected the United States to what is now the Gulf of America. And that moment, 210 years ago, connected my country to yours. And just a few years after that, these same two leaders led the Department of War to fight another war on our southern border, the Seminole Wars. This time to protect our borders against Indian tribes that trespassed our land, raided our towns, and killed Americans. We ultimately won these battles and transferred the great state of Florida in 1821. And then a mere 2 years later, one of these leaders declared something called the Monroe Doctrine. The legacy of then Secretary of War James Monroe, who later became President James Monroe, and Major General Andrew Jackson, who also later became president, defines the challenge that we have before us today. They say history doesn't repeat itself, but it tends to rhyme. And our interest over this shared geography is the same today as it was 200 years ago. Today, the Department of War once again has historic leadership under Secretary Pete Hegseth, committed to working with all of you to secure the Western Hemisphere once and for all. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you. I would now like to invite Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Assistant to the President for Homeland Security, Stephen Miller, to the podium. Sir, the floor is yours.
General Nordhaus. And thank you to my good friend, Secretary Hegseth, who I've long admired, but I've gotten to know personally in the last number of months. And he is as fine a gentleman and as fierce a warrior as you will ever meet. And we've all learned to put our faith and confidence in his leadership of the War Department. So thank you, Pete. There's been a paradigm shift under President Trump in the Western Hemisphere in the last 14 months. Some of that was touched on by the earlier speakers, but just to restate it, we are not going to cede an inch of territory in this hemisphere to our enemies or our adversaries. Our national security, our homeland security, the safety and well-being of our people begins at home, begins in our neighborhood, begins in our home region. And for too long, we have allowed foreign enemies, foreign adversaries, and enemy terrorist organizations to control territory and spaces in this hemisphere where they can project power, project threats, and directly threaten the lives of your citizens and our citizens. And so under the leadership of President Trump, we are using hard power, military power, lethal force to protect and defend the American homeland. Not a single one of your nations should tolerate the existence of a single square mile of territory that is under the control of any entity other than the sovereign governments of your country. The idea that we would have in this hemisphere area that are under the physical control of foreign terrorist organizations, paramilitary organizations, is completely unacceptable. The cartels that operate in this hemisphere are the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda of the Western Hemisphere, and should be treated just as brutally and just as ruthlessly as we treat those organizations. What we have learned after decades of effort is that there is not a criminal justice solution to the cartel problem. There are elements of the problem that require a criminal justice solution, to be sure, but just as we fought Al-Qaeda and fought ISIS with the tip of a very lethal spear, the reason why this is a conference with military leadership and not a conference of lawyers is because these organizations can only be defeated with military power. And I see some heads nodding up front because they understand. You're dealing with a lot of lawyers in your own country, I'm sure. You have my permission not to listen to them. The key condition of human flourishing, of prosperity, is order and security. A country cannot pursue economic growth, cultural enrichment, art, architecture, education, science, if it doesn't have fundamental security first. And for too long, we've been caught in a vicious cycle in this hemisphere where countries from Mexico down to the tip of South America do not provide their citizens with basic physical security. So those citizens, in search of economic opportunity, illegally immigrate to the United States. They pay the smugglers, they pay the cartels, who then grow richer, who then go more powerful, and then your countries in turn become poor because you've lost your citizens, you've lost your human capital, you've lost your opportunities to develop and to grow. So you get poor, the cartels get more powerful, nothing changes, nothing improves. You have to break that cycle. You have to completely sever it. And that begins by dismantling these organizations that deal drugs, deal violence, assassinate, extort, blackmail, and also traffic illegally in human beings. That is a form of terrorism too. Illegal immigration facilitated by criminal networks is a form of terrorism. And those who are stealing your children and stealing your families and stealing your human capital are part of that terrorist continuum and should be thought of as such. It is not a victimless crime when people are paying human smuggling organizations, because that money then fuels assassinations, it fuels violence, it fuels instability, and it continues this cycle. For decades, a lot of organizations were sent to your countries. These are known as NGOs, I think you know the term, non-governmental organizations, and they gave you very, very bad advice for a very, very long time. And basically, they told you, in short, that you needed to be softer and gentler and nicer to the criminals, and that you had to demilitarize your approach and extend more rights and more opportunities to the people who are sabotaging and destroying your society. I would make the point to you, as others have pointed out before, including the president of El Salvador, that the West only achieved the place that it did in human history because it spent previous centuries eradicating the criminal elements within its territories. So the West that we came to know, that had the great music and architecture and science and the most powerful economy. It had spent centuries previous to that establishing order first, so that by the time you get, to say 18th century England, 19th century England, there have been centuries of previous history in which ruthless means were used to get rid of the people who were raping and murdering and defying established systems of order and justice. And then when people could live freely and peaceably, and children and families and women could be safe, then it became possible to pursue all of these higher elements of life. So when people who are coming to countries like yours that have had struggles and difficulties and pains and challenges, and they're telling you anything other than, first and foremost, secure your countries and your territory, they're giving you not only terrible advice, but advice if someone had come to Europe centuries ago and they had followed that advice, Europe would have never become the Europe that it eventually became. And the reason why many Western countries are struggling today is they've forgotten the eternal truth and wisdoms they once followed. And that's why here under President Trump in America, we are returning to those fundamental truths. We're returning to those fundamental principles. So I'll just close by saying that you will have in President Trump, in the White House, in the Department of War, the Department of State, and the whole of our government, unwavering support, unwavering commitment, and fidelity in achieving this mission, which is very simply to eradicate the criminal cartels and terrorist organizations, to deprive them of control of weapons, spaces, institutions, and territory. And the human rights that we are going to protect are not of the savages that torture and rape and murder. The human rights that we are going to protect are of the peaceable citizens who have an absolute human right to live in physical safety and security every day of their lives. And in that mission, I promise you, we will be your closest partner. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce our Secretary of War, the Honorable Pete Hegseth.
Well, good morning, everybody. Well, General Donovan and I are pleased to welcome all of you to Southern Command this morning. I'm honored to be the first Secretary of War to lead a hemispheric defense conference like this in more than 30 years. This conference is about you. This conference is about us. This conference is not called the America's Counter Cartel Conference. It's the America's Counter Cartel Conference. This is about what we together can do. You know, it's been more than 200 years since our nation struggled for independence from foreign rule. The War of 1812 was about the United States defending its independence and protecting its territory. A 47-year-old Carolinian who was a major general in the Army, as was mentioned, Andrew Jackson, defeated a British army almost double the size. Addressing his troops after victory at the Battle of New Orleans, Jackson declared, "Natives of different states acting together for the first time have reaped the fruits of an honorable union." His success galvanized a young country. In 1816, our country elected a Revolutionary War hero as president. James Monroe fought in the Continental Army, leading a charge against German mercenaries fighting for the British. The enemy fired a musket ball at him. It severed his artery and he almost died. But the young captain rallied and grew to be governor of Virginia, Secretary of War, and one of our greatest presidents. In 1823, President Monroe said that the United States owed the success of that young country to the candor and amicable relations with other powers to affirm our national policy. President Monroe declared, "We should consider any attempt on malign countries to extend their system to any portion of this hemisphere as dangerous to our peace and safety." It was the Monroe Doctrine of 1823. And today, some 200 years later, we still marvel at the wisdom of President Monroe's declaration. We, like you, want borders and sovereign territories that are secure. We want unfettered access to key terrain and trade so that our nations can industrialize. And we want to prevent external powers from threatening our peace and independence in our shared neighborhood. This is the essence of the Monroe Doctrine. No external power will interfere in this hemisphere. Ours should be a region of strong, sovereign nations. It's the same principle that animates President Trump's defense approach today. President Trump and his Department of War are ushering in a new era of homeland and hemispheric defense, rooted in the unique heritage of our nation and your nations. Under President Trump, we restored the Department of War. You see, the Department of War was established by General George Washington and served our nation from its founding through our hard-fought victory in World War II. Many of your countries also once had ministries of war. Under President Trump, our nation has a newfound resolve that our founders would recognize, as Stephen alluded to and spoke to. They would recognize it, and they would appreciate it. We are at long last putting America, Americans, and the Americas first, ensuring peace through strength and restoring common sense. At our department, we're doing it by restoring the warrior ethos, rebuilding our military to historic levels, and reestablishing deterrence in this hemisphere and around the world. For too long, leaders in Washington and their foreign policy functionaries abandoned the simple wisdom of the Monroe Doctrine. They were consumed with the United States only going abroad. They ignored the warnings of President John Quincy Adams, who said that if our nation went overseas only in search of monsters to destroy, that we would cease to be the ruler of our own spirit and our own backyard. Under previous leaders, we grew obsessed with every other theater and every other border in the world except our own. These elites reduced our power and presence in this hemisphere, opting for a benign neglect that was anything but benign. In your countries, many leaders accepted the status quo to coexist with narco-terrorism, or for a law enforcement alone approach that failed to deter and dismantle threats. Same happened in our country under the previous administration. And the result of this collective neglect was fatal. More than 1 million Americans were killed by fentanyl, cocaine, and other drugs. Numbers greater than any casualties we've sustained in war. Millions of illegal aliens invaded our borders and destabilized nations across the hemisphere. Under Joe Biden's administration, the human smuggling industry exploded by more than 2,000%, from a $500 million so-called industry in 2018 to $13 billion by 2022. Cartels of terrorists across our hemisphere, enabled by adversaries, created and profited from chaos. What creates chaos? No leadership creates chaos. In our nation, narco-terrorist groups like Tren de Aragua prospered. They raped, they poisoned, they murdered innocent Americans. They terrorized our cities, our towns, and our neighborhoods like they do yours. Across this region, these gangsters control and terrorize large swaths of your territories, kill thousands of your people, and promote chaos that makes normal life sometimes almost impossible. Crime has spiked massively. Our hemisphere has 1/8 of the population, yet 1/3 of the violent crime. There's a reason for that. America's retreat from protecting its citizens and the complacency of many neighbors in this hemisphere was a great betrayal. That's what it was, a great betrayal against our people and our nations. Well, President Trump recognizes the wisdom of the Monroe Doctrine, and the days of us betraying and endangering our own citizens are finished. President Trump has reestablished the Monroe Doctrine, the Trump corollary of the Monroe Doctrine, or if you'd like, for short, you can just call it the Donroe Doctrine. Under President Trump, securing America's interest in the Western Hemisphere and keeping our homeland safe are our top national security priorities. The President's historic national defense strategy ensures that the Department of War will prioritize resources around the threats and objectives that are core to homeland defense and the people and prosperity of the American people. And to start, the Department of War is once again defending our borders as a priority of our national defense. With our law enforcement partners, we are defending our borders and making our streets safe again. Crossings at our southern border, at the U.S.-Mexico border, have dropped to the lowest number in history. Murders nationwide have plummeted by more than 20%. We now have operational control of our southern border. 0 people are crossing our southern border. We will not rest until we have complete operational control of every inch of all of our borders. So it starts with us. We're addressing it, but we're not stopping there. Under President Trump, for the first time in history, the Department of War is on the offense against narco-terrorists as well. I should back up a step, though. In order to get 100% operational control of our border, we didn't just look at Border Patrol and say, that's your job. It's a law enforcement function. We deployed the United States military. Right now, the Division Command of the 101st Airborne is in operational control of the southern border. We ensured that the most capable assets we had in our country were deployed to our own border to defend that border against the narco-terrorists and drug dealers seeking to enter our country, not treating it simply as a law enforcement function, working with our partners, but recognizing it's a core military function. But going on offense with Operation Southern Spear has restored deterrence against the narco-terrorist cartels that profited from poisoning Americans. Last month, we went a few weeks without targeting a single boat. Why? Well, because we couldn't find a whole lot of boats to sink. And that's the whole point, is to establish deterrence from narco-terrorists who have been able to traffic almost unfettered. And if the consequence was simply to be arrested and then released, well, that's a consequence they'd already priced in a long time ago. A new dynamic had to be put in motion in order for their decision cycle to change. And when adversaries are forced to move out of comfortable positions, as you know, as military men and women, they're more vulnerable when they're moving in a different direction, which is also the point. Drug overdoses that kill our citizens have dropped. Flows of fentanyl, a weapon of mass destruction, are down 56%. We will continue to destroy these threats. In January, U.S. forces raided and arrested the most dangerous house and the most dangerous compound inside the most fortified fort in the capital city of Caracas, of 2 indicted individuals, Nicolas Maduro and his wife, fugitives of the U.S. law. Operation Absolute Resolve showed the bravery of America's best, our warfighters. Nobody can do what the United States of America can do. It's not even close. President Trump has shown what is possible when you reject the status quo delusion that threats to our homeland and our hemisphere are somehow secondary. America is prepared to take on these threats and go on the offense alone if necessary. However, it is our preference, and it is the goal of this conference, that in the interest of this neighborhood, we all do it together with you, with our neighbors and with our allies who are eager and willing and capable. To do this, to work together, we must first acknowledge what was lost and then understand what needs to be restored. All the nations represented in this room are offsprings of Western civilization. Our nations are and always will be united by our heritage, our history, and geography in this new world. We share the same interests. And because of this, we face an essential test. Whether our nations will be and remain Western nations with distinct characteristics, Christian nations under God. Proud of our shared heritage with strong borders and prosperous people ruled not by violence and chaos, but by law, order, and common sense. Or whether we are permanently torn apart by something else, led astray by competing forces, radical narco-communism and anarcho-tyranny, which threaten our people, borders, and sovereign lands in the name of a false sovereignty or a false peace. uncontrolled mass migration, which overwhelms domestic resources intended for deserving citizens and drives unchecked crime and unchecked violence. Or the belief in so-called globalism that seeks to erase our distinct national identities in the name of tolerance, erase our borders in the name of compassion, and erase our warrior ethos and that which makes us strong in the name of so-called diversity and political correctness. One of the dumbest phrases in military history, which used to be echoed from the former Defense Department in the previous administration, they would say it over and over and over again, was "Our diversity is our strength." It's the single dumbest phrase in military history. Because what is our strength is our unity. Our strength is in our shared purpose, in the training we do together, the capabilities we have to do, we can do together. In our context, the Constitution we swear an oath to defend together, the uniform we wear together. That is our strength. We reject other notions and offer a new choice. We must defend our national interest and restore our national identities. Otherwise, the outcome is the same. Our hemisphere will be poorer, more dangerous, and weaker. This matters not because we seek to preach to you about culture wars or ideologies, or to tell you how to run your countries. We're not here to tell you how to run your countries. Instead, it matters how we assess the threats facing us and the choices that we make on how to overcome them. That is what will define our destiny. President Trump understands that today's threats to border security and key terrain in our hemisphere are existential questions for our nation and for all of yours. When adversaries conduct incursions in this hemisphere, off the coast of a U.S. state, Alaska, or off the coast of Greenland, or in the Gulf of America, or the Caribbean, that is a direct threat to the United States homeland and to peace in this hemisphere. When adversaries control ports or infrastructure along strategic choke points for U.S. and hemispheric trade, such as the Panama Canal, or install military facilities just miles off our shore, that is a threat to the United States homeland and peace to this hemisphere. When terrorist killers and cartels capture strategic infrastructure, resources, and entire towns or cities close to U.S. borders and U.S. shores, or profit from mass illegal migration, that is a threat to the United States homeland and a threat to all of you as well, to the Americas. The same adversaries that threaten our shared heritage threaten our shared geography as well. They seek to displace the historic North-South relationship that we've always shared with some sort of a new global South that excludes the United States and other Western nations, but includes non-Western powers and other adversaries. The answer to our challenge is not to ignore our geography in the name of global interests, but to embrace our shared geography in the name of national interests. That is why President Trump has drawn a new strategic map from Greenland to the Gulf of America to the Panama Canal and its surrounding countries. At the Department of War, we call this strategic map the Greater North America. Why? Because every sovereign nation and territory north of the equator, from Greenland to Ecuador and from Alaska to Guyana, is not part of the global South. It is our immediate security perimeter in this great neighborhood that we all live in. Each one of these countries border either the North Atlantic or the North Pacific. Each one of these countries sits north of the two basic geographic barriers that exist in this region, the Amazon and the Andes Mountains. This is basic geography that we don't teach in schools as much as we should. And it restores our North-South relations, and we must get it right. In the North, the United States must enhance posture and presence in cooperation with you and our sovereign partners to defend our shared immediate security perimeter. In the South, meaning south of the equator, the other side of this great neighborhood, we will strengthen partnerships through increased burden sharing. This will enable you to take your greater role to defend the South Atlantic and the South Pacific, and to secure critical infrastructure and resources in partnership with us and other Western nations. This is what we did in World War II. just like we sunk ships with torpedoes in World War II. At the Department of War, we called it the quarter sphere defense. And we will do this again. If we're serious about our national security, and if we prioritize geography, business as usual will not stand. This means that for every country in this hemisphere, border security must be your top priority. Border security is national security. President Trump said it when he first started to run. You're not a country if you don't have borders, and he's right. President Trump sealed our border by directing the military to mobilize resources and personnel to stop invasion by cartels and other criminal actors. You can do this as well, and many of you have. This also means that you too can and must go on the offense against narco-terrorists. We've had great collaboration with many countries in recent months, and I want to thank every country in this room that has supported our access to find, fix, and finish cartel targets. We have only just begun to work with you. More must be done by you and by us to target narco-terrorist groups across all domains. We will dismantle narco-terrorist networks in this hemisphere, and we will deny access to the state adversaries who support them. We will correct the mistakes of the past, the mistakes of the so-called Global South. I want to thank General Donovan, who has been an excellent partner and a great new leader here at Southern Command. One of the great mistakes of the past was that our leaders didn't provide the U.S. Southern Command with the support that it needed. It was a command chock full of lawyers and social workers and NGOs, law enforcement. That's changing. General, I'm directing my team to correct these historic failures, to ensure that your command has the resources and staff that you need for this robust mission ahead. It's the least we can do. I want to, absolutely, thank you. It's about time. But it's not just us at the Department of War, and it's not just Southern Command. This is across the Trump administration. This is across the Department of War as well. Stephen Miller, thank you for your support and your leadership, for your clarity, understanding why this matters to each American citizen, and why the War Department is central to ensuring that it happens. It doesn't happen without President Trump, and it doesn't happen without your clarity and your leadership. I want to thank General Nordhaus as well for your support at every level. There's so many to thank. I see Corey Lewandowski here from the Department of Homeland Security. It doesn't happen without the Department of Homeland Security. Of course, Joseph Humeyer, the other part of the new bromance between him and General Donovan. Eric Garrissey, who from day one in my office, he was my first sergeant in Iraq. He's one of my senior advisors. Day one, he worked at SOUTHCOM for a long time, said, we need to be focused on the cartel threat. And he built a team to help put us in that direction, a lot of which manifests to this day. Patrick Weaver, Phil Hegseth, who I happen to know, and Ricky Berea, my chief, for doing a great job putting this together. Tony Salisbury, thank you. So many folks that every single day in Washington, I hope you know, are working hard to run as fast as you are, to stand alongside you in this mission. This is not a conference with flags so we can pat ourselves on the back. I can tell you that. If I sold that to President Trump as the objective, he'd kick me out of his office. This is an operational conference to bring our countries more closely together to achieve a shared objective and do so aggressively. This is not a one-way street. Every partner in this region has to do more and invest more in your security as well. We, like you, want a hemisphere of sovereign, secure, and prosperous nations. We, like you, want what another great American president, Teddy Roosevelt, called the permanent peace on this hemisphere, and it will require action from all of us. You know, our schools used to teach American school children about our blessed history. Every child in grade school grew up knowing the remarkable story of this country. They knew that President James Monroe was once an orphan, that at a mere 16 years old, he had to look after his siblings. I've got an almost 16-year-old. He couldn't look after anything. It's remarkable. Well, that orphan grew to be not just one of the greatest presidents, but one of our greatest Americans. after his presidency when his wife died and he became frail and ill with heart failure. But he still spoke about what he called our shared cause of liberty. Still talked about the toils and the perils of our war for independence. James Monroe, our 7th president, died on July 4th, the 4th of July, Independence Day, 1831, 50 years after 1776. What I like to say is, here at the Department of War, we're in the 1775 business, which is when Americans took up arms before they even declared independence. All of you are also in the 1775 business. Without the force of arms, without our militaries, we cannot keep our country safe. That's my responsibility, and it is yours. With Donald Trump in the Oval Office and with all of you here, we can still realize that long ago dream of James Monroe in our time. We will make the Americas great again. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Secretary Hegseth. We now invite each of our partners to provide short remarks. Please deliver your remarks seated at your chair instead of coming up to the podium. Prime Minister Phillips of Guyana, you have the floor.
Thank you. I thank the government of the United States of America and the Honorable Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, for convening this inaugural America's Counter Cartel Conference and for the invitation extended to Guyana. Guyana and the United States share a strong and expanding strategic partnership built on mutual trust and robust defense and security cooperation. Through capacity building, joint exercises, and policy and technical engagements, our countries have worked closely together to combat narco-trafficking and other forms of transnational crime. The transnational activities of cartels, gangs, and other criminal actors threaten regional peace and security. These networks undermine the rule of law, weaken institutions, and threaten the safety and economic well-being of our citizens. For countries like Guyana, located along important maritime and regional transit corridors, addressing narco-trafficking and narco-terrorism requires strong cooperation among our nations. These threats demand coordinated intelligence sharing, enhanced operational cooperation, and strengthened defense capabilities across the hemisphere, and to continue to respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of every state. As our region continues to grow economically and strategically, it is also essential that we work together to protect critical infrastructure, strengthen national institutions, and enhance our resilience to evolving security threats. Through deeper cooperation and partnership, we can ensure that our hemisphere remains safe, secure, and a true zone of peace. Guyana welcomes the adoption of the Joint Security Declaration of this conference and looks forward to joining the coalition to combat narco-terrorism. The government of Guyana remains committed to being a reliable and active partner in advancing the security and stability of the Western Hemisphere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Lieutenant General Presti of Argentina, you have the floor.
Señor Secretario de Guerra, señor General, autoridades aquí presentes, antes de comenzar, quiero expresar nuestro respeto por los militares de Estados Unidos de América que recientemente perdieron la vida en combate cumpliendo con su deber. Sirvieron a su país con honor. Argentina honra su sacrificio y acompaña a sus familias. Igualmente también con el accidente que ha tenido la Fuerza Aérea de Bolivia, un país hermano, nuestras condolencias. Vengo en nombre del presidente de la Nación Argentina, nuestro comandante en jefe de las Fuerzas Armadas, nuestro líder, Javier Milei, para reafirmar el compromiso de la República Argentina con la seguridad y la estabilidad de nuestro hemisferio. Los estados del continente enfrentamos amenazas de naturaleza similar, aunque en distinta intensidad, que afectan a nuestros ciudadanos, a nuestros bienes, a nuestros recursos estratégicos y a nuestras infraestructuras críticas. Frente a estos desafíos, la defensa constituye una función indispensable y central del Estado. La Argentina ocupa un lugar clave en el extremo sur de nuestro continente. Somos un eje natural de proyección hacia el Atlántico Sur y hacia la Antártida, y un actor con incidencia directa en las cadenas de suministros globales a partir de nuestros recursos estratégicos y nuestra capacidad productiva. Esta posición nos sitúa como un nodo relevante dentro de la arquitectura de seguridad regional y seguridad global, con la responsabilidad de contribuir a la estabilidad del sistema americano. El eje central de nuestra política de defensa es el desarrollo del capital humano y la incorporación inteligente de innovación tecnológica. Esa integración nos permite construir fuerzas armadas modernas, ágiles y preparadas para aportar estabilidad, previsibilidad y cooperación internacional efectiva en el ámbito regional. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, sir. Minister Monroe of the Bahamas, you have the floor.
Good morning, Excellencies. On behalf of the government and people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, I extend warm appreciation to Secretary Hegseth and the government of the United States for convening this conference and for the seriousness of purpose which it signals to criminal networks across this hemisphere. Let me be direct. This gathering is a declaration that we will no longer permit cartel networks, narcotics traffickers, and organized criminal enterprises to exploit the gaps between and within our jurisdictions. And the Bahamas stands fully committed to that declaration. Allow me to use this occasion to reiterate that the military cooperation between the Bahamas and the United States must be based on the shared commitment to peace, sovereignty, and security, consistent with our existing bilateral agreements and with full respect for sovereignty and laws of each country and with due regard to the international legal norms. The Bahamas intends to work closely with the United States Department of War in expanding joint military cooperation, recognizing the shared responsibility for regional security and stability. The Bahamas welcomes closer collaboration on military-to-military efforts regarding border security, counter-narcotics, interoperability, and intelligence sharing. The disparity between the scale of our security responsibility and our resource capacity is significant, and it is not sustainable. Our vast maritime domain requires continuous aerial and maritime patrols. Our surveillance infrastructure requires sustained capital investment, and our security personnel require advanced training in counter-narcotics, counter-trafficking, and cyber defense. The concept of peace through strength carries enduring resonances, and if we are candid, enduring misapplications. For a small state like the Bahamas, it is not about arsenal size. It is about integrity of our institutions, the credibility of our courts, and the depths of our partnerships. Hence, peace through strength, as we understand it, is not unilateral. It is collective. It rests on the recognition that hemispheric security is indivisible, that what weakens Nassau ultimately weakens Miami, that instability in Port-au-Prince reaches Nassau long before it reaches Washington, and that small states on the front line of transnational crime deserve genuine partners, not conditional patrons. Let me close by stating the Bahamas' commitment and expectation with directness this forum warrants. The Bahamas will continue to operate as a frontline maritime security partner, disrupting narcotics trafficking routes, denying criminal networks the use of our waters and airspace, and contributing meaningfully to the security architecture of this hemisphere. The Bahamas brings to this partnership something no defense budget can manufacture: geography, institutional commitment, and a track record of cooperation spanning more than 4 decades. We ask only what we give: genuine partnership grounded in mutual respect and shared responsibility. The Americas either secures itself collectively or it fails collectively. The Commonwealth of the Bahamas has chosen collective security, and we invite every partner assembled here to meet that commitment with equal resolve, equal investment, and equal determination. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Monroe. Minister Marin of Belize, you have the floor.
Good morning. Secretary Hegseth, General Donovan, distinguished ministers, heads of delegation, and colleagues. On behalf of the government and people of Belize, I extend sincere appreciation to the United States for convening this timely and important conference here in Miami. I thank the leadership of the Department of War for bringing us together around a shared purpose: strengthening our collective response to cartel activity and the transnational crime across the Western Hemisphere. For Belize, this is not abstract. As a small but strategically located nation bridging Central America and the Caribbean, we sit along key maritime and overland routes exploited by criminal networks. These networks traffic narcotics, weapons, and human beings. They undermine governance, distort economies, fuel corruption, and erode the safety and confidence of our citizens. Cartels and transnational criminal organizations do not respect our borders. They adapt quickly, leveraging technology, exploiting institutional gaps, and moving seamlessly across jurisdictions. Our response, therefore, must be equally adaptive, coordinated, and resolute. Belize remains firmly committed to a comprehensive security strategy that combines strong border protection, maritime domain awareness, intelligence-led operations, and close interagency collaboration. We are investing in the professionalization of our defense and security forces, strengthening our legal frameworks, and enhancing cooperation with regional and international partners. But no nation, in particular Belize, can confront this threat alone. The Western Hemisphere is interconnected by trade, travel, and shared democratic values. When criminal networks destabilize one country, the effects ripple across us all. That is why partnerships, regional and multilateral, are not optional, they are essential. We must deepen intelligence sharing, improve joint operational capabilities, strengthen financial tracking to disrupt illicit flows, and invest in community resilience to prevent recruitment by criminal organizations. We must ensure that our efforts uphold the rule of law, for it is precisely this principle that criminal enterprises seek to weaken. Colleagues, Belize stands ready to work shoulder to shoulder with our partners to safeguard our region. Together, through unity of purpose and action, we can deny transnational criminal organizations the space they seek to operate and build a more and secure, prosperous hemisphere for all our peoples. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Marin. Minister Salinas of Bolivia, you have the floor.
Thank you. Señor Secretario de Guerra Hegseth, señor Comandante del Comando Sur General Donovan, buenos días a las autoridades presentes y delegados y colegas de distintos países. Bolivia comparece ante este foro plenamente consciente de las amenazas emergentes que hoy desafían la estabilidad de nuestra región, generando incluso tensiones e inestabilidad entre países hermanos con un entorno de guerra híbrida permanente. Reconocemos que el crimen organizado transnacional ha mutado hacia formas de actor parainstitucional, operando con impunidad a través de las fronteras que hasta ahora han sido porosas, erosionando la soberanía efectiva de nuestros estados. Ante esta realidad, Bolivia propone la consolidación de una seguridad cooperativa e integral. Buscamos establecer mecanismos de confianza mutua y coordinación de acciones combinadas con nuestros vecinos y con los Estados Unidos, alineándonos con el paradigma de que la seguridad de un Estado es interdependiente con la de sus vecinos y sus aliados. Nuestra posición geográfica estratégica, como una síntesis donde se integran los Andes y la Amazonía, nos sitúa en una encrucijada crítica. Podemos permitir que el crimen organizado transnacional nos utilice como un hub para hacer la distribución de insumos y sustancias ilegales, o podemos transformarlos en un hub soberano que distribuye información y seguridad para todo el hemisferio. Para alcanzar este objetivo, mi país está trabajando con inversión propia en el desarrollo de un sistema de vigilancia integral que integra datos satelitales, drones y radares militares. Esta es nuestra primera estrategia para permear, sellar las fronteras que el crimen ha explotado y fundamentalmente para controlar las zonas grises que se han constituido en nuestro territorio tras de 20 años de indolencia y desinstitucionalización. Entendemos que la defensa moderna exige un enfoque multidominio, ya que las amenazas actuales ejercen un control no solo del espacio físico, sino también en el virtual, en el cognitivo. Es el dominio cognitivo y virtual donde el crimen organizado transnacional libra una de sus batallas más peligrosas, afectando la mente de los pobladores locales para usarlos como escudos de protección y legitimidad social. Nuestra determinación es clara. Buscamos que la acción del Estado boliviano ataque los núcleos estratégicos del crimen organizado transnacional, reduciendo al máximo cualquier daño colateral. Sin embargo, para alcanzar nivel de precisión técnica, inteligencia, estrategia y superioridad decisional que esta misión requiere y necesitamos de la cooperación activa de nuestros vecinos y aliados. Para mejorar nuestra capacidad operativa, Bolivia está lista para asumir su rol como eje de estabilidad en el corazón de Sudamérica, protegiendo nuestros recursos estratégicos y garantizando que la ley y la soberanía prevalezcan sobre el caos criminal. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Minister Salinas. Mr. Barros of Chile, you have the floor.
Thanks. Good morning. Thanks, Secretary Hegseth and General Donovan, and thanks to all of them who had created the initiative of this great meeting. It's great to see the government of the United States of America leading the war against cartels, illegal immigration, and many social diseases our countries are suffering today. Let me respectfully say, welcome back. It's very good for us to see we have the States back again. And this conference and this meeting, and we are getting together, we are joining because there's a great threat in cartels and other criminals. Why? Because they hurt our societies. They create poverty, they create pain, they create weakness in our countries. They act against the law. That's a great issue. That's why we go against them. It's against the law approved democratically in our nations, in accordance with our sovereignty and the power and the decision of the people. And our governments are forced to defend the law, the rule of law. It's because the law of civilized nations, we will join and work together to end the pandemic of the cartels and all the criminal actions are associated to them. The great difference between them and us is that this alliance is against criminals, and we will fight them. And the decision is to strengthen our work together, as you mentioned, and we will do it in accordance with the rule of law. And we will be tough, we will fight, we will be in a war, because the law is with us, but we will, rather than distract the cartels, is impose the rule of law to come back again to our territories. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barros. Minister Zamora of Costa Rica, you have the floor.
Me circunscribo a las palabras de bienvenida y agradecimiento que han dicho mis colegas. Agradecemos que la doctrina de los Estados Unidos de seguridad y defensa del año 2026 priorice este continente, porque, don Pete, llega usted en el momento en que las Américas más necesita el apoyo de los Estados Unidos. Comanda usted hoy, como en el pasado, el coronel Coster comandó el 7º de Caballería, apoyando a las democracias del continente en el momento en que más lo necesitan. Si tuviéramos que definir la situación de las Américas antes de este esfuerzo de los Estados Unidos, tenemos que definirlas como democracias que están comprometidas ante el poder del narcotráfico y los carteles. Hoy lo que nos ofrece los Estados Unidos es trabajar juntos para que los valores compartidos de democracia y los valores cívicos que compartimos con el pueblo y el gobierno de los Estados Unidos se hagan una realidad en todo el continente. Le hablo desde un país, Costa Rica, en el que hay más estadounidenses en mi país que costarricenses en los Estados Unidos. Y eso nos hace comprender la hermandad entre dos pueblos, como los pueblos latinoamericanos y americanos aquí presentes. Lo primero fue que mi país entendió que la soberanía no puede ser una frontera que los narcotraficantes no respetan, pero los esfuerzos de la justicia sí. Entonces, llevamos a cabo un tratado de patrullaje conjunto con los Estados Unidos que da autoridad de policía, autoridad jurisdiccional a los navíos de Estados Unidos cuando están en mares costarricenses. Y eso ha sido una disuasión efectiva y práctica. Y hoy con el Comando Sur estamos trabajando para que todas las fronteras costarricenses tengan escáneres en aire, mar y tierra, para que ninguna exportación que llegue a los Estados Unidos desde Costa Rica no sea escaneada. Es decir, evitemos que el narcotráfico use las rutas de comercio para traer droga a los Estados Unidos. Y ese esfuerzo conjunto que estamos haciendo con el Comando Sur me parece que es emblemático y en línea justamente de construir esta cooperación y este trabajo conjunto. Concluyo, señor secretario de Guerra, mencionando que también está el Tratado de San José, que nos da un marco legal también para incrementar estas cooperaciones y estos trabajos conjuntos en materia de seguridad. Costa Rica va a proponer su nombre porque con el liderazgo de los Estados Unidos, nuestros países deben definir también una vicepresidencia operativa. Y nosotros consideraríamos un honor ocupar esta vicepresidencia si así este foro lo define. Muchas gracias, señor secretario.
Thank you, Minister Zamora. General Onofre of the Dominican Republic, you have the floor.
Muy buenos días, señor secretario Hegseth, general Donovan, homólogos y jefes de delegaciones del hemisferio, señoras y señores. Es un alto honor para la República Dominicana participar en esta Conferencia de las Américas contra los carteles, aquí en la sede del Comando Sur de Estados Unidos, espacio que reafirma nuestro compromiso común con la seguridad y la estabilidad del hemisferio. Nuestro país reconoce que para avanzar en la paz es imprescindible asegurar nuestras patrias y nuestras fronteras. No puede haber desarrollo sostenible sin seguridad. No puede haber prosperidad sin estabilidad. En nuestra condición de nación caribeña, ubicada en una posición geoestratégica clave, asumimos con responsabilidad el desafío de enfrentar el narcotráfico, el narcoterrorismo, el crimen organizado transnacional y las amenazas emergentes que impactan directamente a nuestras sociedades. Respaldamos firmemente esta declaración conjunta de seguridad, orientada a ampliar la cooperación multilateral y bilateral, fortalecer los esfuerzos integrales de nuestros gobiernos en materia de seguridad fronteriza, proteger infraestructuras críticas y consolidar nuestras capacidades en ciberdefensa. Estos desafíos no reconocen fronteras, por tanto, nuestra respuesta debe ser en conjunto como región. Creemos en la promoción de la paz a través de la fuerza legítima del Estado y en la cooperación estratégica entre naciones aliadas. Unirnos en una coalición hemisférica contra el narcoterrorismo y otras amenazas compartidas no es solo una opción, es una necesidad histórica. La República Dominicana reafirma su firme compromiso con la estabilidad, la democracia y el desarrollo de la región. Estamos listos para alinear prioridades, compartir buenas prácticas y explorar nuevas oportunidades de colaboración que nos permitan anticipar riesgos, disuadir amenazas y proteger a nuestros ciudadanos. Juntos, con voluntad política y acción coordinada, fortaleceremos la seguridad del hemisferio occidental y construiremos un futuro más próspero y más seguro para nuestras naciones. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, General Onofre. Minister Lofredo of Ecuador, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. I am here today representing the government of the Republic of Ecuador. I stand before this multilateral forum not only as a Minister of Defense, but as the spokesman for a nation that has decided with absolute firmness and political will to confront the greatest threat of our contemporary history, transnational narco-terrorism. We are at a turning point. The decisions we make at this conference will directly impact the security and stability of our future generations. Historically, our nations have shared the values of democracy, freedom, and the rule of law. Today, those values demand a common strategic response from us. On the basis of this principle, our national defense policy aligns with the United States National Defense Strategy. Ecuador recognizes that the border security is an essential component of national and hemispheric security. The threats we face have mutated. We are not dealing with dispersed criminal networks, but with destabilizing structures with transnational scope and links that erode democratic institutions. narco-terrorist organizations not only traffic drugs, they challenge the legitimate authority of the state and affect the freedom and prosperity of our citizens. The security of our hemisphere is indivisible. Every nation that strengthens its capacities contributes to the regional stability. In this context, Ecuador's commitment to its own security also constitutes an important contribution to the security of the Americas. During the last few years, Ecuador has ceased to be merely a transit country and has become one of the main departure points for drug trafficking to international markets. This evolution of criminal activity has generated a wave of unprecedented violence in our recent history. In addition to this, there exists a structural factor that cannot be ignored. The expansion of illicit crops in the region and the modernization of production and distribution chains. As long as these dynamics persist, the pressure on our territories will continue, confirming that we face a challenge that transcends borders and demands effective cooperation among states. To address this, our government made a clear decision to restore the authority of the state without any ambiguity. Through the declaration of an internal armed conflict, our armed forces and national police, acting in a coordinated manner, are decisively confronting these groups, reaffirming the state's control over its territory and restoring the principle of authority. As the Ecuadorian government, we propose to strengthen cooperation on three specific fronts: reinforcing intelligence and interoperability capacities, modernizing border and port control using advanced technology, as well as a sustained support scheme that consolidates our institutional capacities in the long term. We need to keep in mind that it's not just about combating illicit shipments. It's about protecting our societies, our economies, and our future. Ecuador is willing to do its part. We hope to consolidate together with you, with all of you sitting at this table, a coordinated effort that ensures organized crime has no place in the Western Hemisphere. The effectiveness of that effort will depend on our ability to consolidate it by assuming real co-responsibility and sustaining it over time with the firmness and determination that this threat demands. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Lafredo. Minister Marino of El Salvador, you have the floor.
Señor Secretario de Guerra Pete Hegseth, señor General Donovan, comandante del Comando Sur, miembros del staff de los Estados Unidos, resto de miembros de los diferentes países que están acá representados, tengan buenos días. Primero, es para nosotros como salvadoreños un honor el haber sido seleccionados para integrar este selecto grupo de países que han mostrado el interés de generar un cambio en la seguridad hemisférica. Quiero traer a este punto uno de los pensamientos en los cuales nuestro presidente Nayib Bukele se ha basado para hacer la transformación que está realizando en El Salvador. Y es que él dice que quien perdona al lobo sacrifica a las ovejas. Y eso es lo que estaba sucediendo en nuestro país, que las ONGs, estas organizaciones de derechos humanos, siempre decían que había que proteger a los niños, a los delincuentes. Y obviamente dejaba en manos de la delincuencia a la población honrada. El señor presidente, en contra de muchas opiniones internacionales inclusive, tomó la decisión de hacer uso de la Fuerza Armada para combatir la amenaza mayor que teníamos en ese momento, que era las maras y pandillas. Y nos dio la orden de integrarnos a la Policía Nacional Civil para resolver ese problema. Y en un corto tiempo transformó nuestro presidente Bukele a El Salvador de ser la capital del homicidio, de ser el país más peligroso del mundo, a convertirse en el país más seguro del hemisferio occidental. Una de las líneas de operaciones del señor presidente Nayib Bukele desde un principio, cuando pusimos en ejecución el Plan Control Territorial, fue la lucha contra el narcotráfico. Y cuando otros países aún no comenzaban a hacer ese trabajo, nosotros los salvadoreños, con una marina pequeña, con capacidades no tan bondadosas como la de otros países, salíamos hasta 1000 millas a hacer sendas incautaciones de droga. Y creo que eso demuestra la voluntad de nuestro presidente y demuestra que la teoría llevada a la práctica da resultados. Recientemente tuvimos uno de los logros mayores en la lucha contra el narcotráfico, que fue la incautación de un buque multipropósito, 54 metros de eslora, cargado con 6.6 toneladas de cocaína a 380 millas de nuestras costas. Para lograr esto, obviamente, nosotros también tenemos que reconocer y agradecer a Estados Unidos el apoyo que nos da, que nos permite ese honor de entrenar junto con sus fuerzas élites. En la visita que hizo nuestro presidente el año pasado a la Casa Blanca, que luego yo tuve la oportunidad de visitar el Pentágono, le hacíamos unas solicitudes a ustedes, secretario, y que le pedíamos que nos enviara otro equipo de fuerzas especiales de los SEALs para entrenar con nuestros tridentes. Y accedió a eso, tenemos entrenando con nosotros, y también le puedo decir que los resultados se están viendo reflejados en estas últimas incautaciones que hemos realizado. Como salvadoreños, queremos decirle a todos los acá presentes que la voluntad de los salvadoreños está para ayudar a todos los demás países que puedan necesitar tal vez de alguna orientación o de alguna transmisión de la experiencia que nosotros hemos tenido, porque en verdad transformar un país de ser el país más peligroso del mundo a el más seguro del hemisferio no ha sido tan fácil, pero también es el reflejo de otro de los conceptos que nuestro presidente mantiene, y dice que no puede haber delincuencia más fuerte que el poder del Estado, y que cuando la delincuencia se apodera de un Estado es porque sus funcionarios no son corruptos o no están con la voluntad de combatirlo. Así que con esto quiero reiterar el apoyo del gobierno de El Salvador en este esfuerzo. Estamos contentos de que hayan retomado la doctrina Monroe. Consideramos que la seguridad de cada uno de los países contribuye a la seguridad de todo nuestro continente y, por lo tanto, la seguridad de manera individual de cada país. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Minister Moreno. Minister Sáenz of Guatemala, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Guatemala say present. Guatemala dice presente. Y dice presente como un Estado comprometido con la defensa del hemisferio occidental. Guatemala comprende con absoluta claridad que los carteles no son únicamente organizaciones criminales. Son estructuras que erosionan la soberanía, distorsionan las economías, infiltran las instituciones del Estado, actúan inclusive como filtros con intereses extrahemisféricos. Y por supuesto, estas organizaciones no comparten nuestros valores, no comparten nuestra libertad y no comparten los intereses de nuestros estados. Para Guatemala, la seguridad fronteriza, la seguridad hemisférica es prioridad. Por ello, ya estamos trabajando en la operación Cinturón de Fuego, un despliegue estratégico que asegura nuestra frontera, principalmente la más porosa y la más peligrosa con nuestro hermano país de México. Además, cierra los espacios a las economías ilícitas que traen estas organizaciones, porque también entendemos que esta amenaza es híbrida. Compartimos la convicción de que la paz no son únicamente declaraciones en conferencias. Compartimos que necesitamos determinación, necesitamos capacidades, pero necesitamos una cooperación real. Y nuestro compromiso como Guatemala no se limita únicamente a palabras. Hoy podemos lucir que ya pudimos colaborar con 2 contingentes en Haití, asumiendo con responsabilidad, una responsabilidad concreta, la restauración del orden y la estabilidad en el Caribe. Creemos en la corresponsabilidad hemisférica. Guatemala no es un espectador en esta etapa. Aspiramos a ser un socio que comparte la carga, que invierte en su propia defensa y que contribuye activamente a un frente unido contra estas organizaciones criminales y contra cualquiera que busque debilitar las democracias en nuestro hemisferio. Guatemala confirma con hechos lo que ha hecho históricamente. Hemos estado siempre del lado correcto de la historia. Y lo quiero lucir, quiero volver a decirlo. Guatemala ha estado del lado correcto de la historia. La paz no es una ausencia de conflicto. La paz es un resultado de la fuerza legítima del Estado, ejercida con responsabilidad, con legitimidad, pero con determinación. Guatemala cree completamente en la paz desde la fortaleza, en la disuasión creíble y en la cooperación estratégica. Guatemala cree en un hemisferio donde el crimen organizado y los actores desestabilizadores no encuentren ningún espacio para actuar y menos para prosperar. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Minister Sayans. As a reminder to our partners, please try to limit your remarks to 2 to 3 minutes so we can stay on time. Thank you very much. Secretary Rodriguez of Honduras, you have the floor.
Good morning. On behalf of the President of FURA, the State of Honduras, and the Armed Forces, we would like to express our sincere gratitude for the invitation to participate in this important conference. This forum reaffirms a reality we all recognize. The fight against cartels and transnational organized crime cannot be addressed in isolation. It is a hemispheric threat that requires joint response, permanent cooperation, and a shared strategic vision. Honduras occupies a key geographic position in the continent, which has been exploited by criminal organizations using our territory as a corridor for illicit activities. In light of this reality, the new government has made a firm commitment to strengthen its operations and actively contribute to regional security. Today, this morning, we are here to reaffirm our commitment to work alongside our allies, friends, and neighbors through regional cooperation, sharing strategic information, and coordinating efforts to actively confront criminal organizations that threaten democracy. Honduras will continue to fulfill its responsibility with determination and with the firm's political will to maintain peace and security on the Americas. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Secretary Rodriguez. Ambassador Marks of Jamaica, you have the floor.
Thank you. Honorable Peter Hegseth, General Francis Donovan, Mr. Stephen Miller, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to be here this morning. I bring remarks on behalf of the government of Jamaica, and particularly our Prime Minister and Minister of Defense, Dr. Andrew Holness. But Mr. Secretary, before I get into the remarks, I must tell you that back in December, when I met what I now call your crack team of Mr. Humir, advisors Riva and Hegseth, I thought we were going to be having the usual committees and white papers. So today, having this meeting in such a short time is very commendable, and especially in light of what is happening all over the globe. To see you here, it conveys more than anything that you could say of your intention to be serious about the threats confronting our hemisphere. Thank you. Jamaica and the United States of America share a special relationship characterized by decades of strong bonds of friendship, development, and trade cooperation. This year, our countries will commemorate the 64 years since the establishment of diplomatic relations. Jamaica's participation in this America's Counter Cartel Conference is an extension of the strong relationship that exists between the United States and Jamaica. Transnational organized crime poses one of the most significant threats to Jamaica and the peace of our citizens and visitors. These threat actors leverage criminal networks transcending national borders with connecting nodes across the Americas that extend even beyond the Western Hemisphere. The vectors that facilitate narcotics trafficking by cartels and drug syndicates are the essential elements that link the movement of small arms and light weapons, money laundering, and trafficking of a range of other contraband. Jamaica sees it as crucial to support a regional counter-narcotics thrust as the country's recognition of the dangers that transnational organized crime groups bring to domestic security, law enforcement, and peace. Annually, Jamaica's security forces seize high volumes of cocaine. And in fact, in 2025 alone, the security forces seized over 1,200 illegal weapons because of the nexus between illicit drugs and guns trade in the region. These realities reflect a nexus between local drug pushers and gangs with external drug syndicates and transnational organized crime groups, which support the fact that these networks do not exist in a vacuum. Similarly, the counter-cartel efforts by nation states cannot take place in a vacuum. We acknowledge that this must be a collaborative effort, multi-agency, and across the wider region. So Jamaica, again, acknowledges the appreciation, the support of the United States in coming up with this coalition, and also in supporting our own Plan Secure Jamaica. Through tangible commitments and collaboration with the USA, Jamaica has been able to reduce murders by over the past year by over 40%, a significant decline. And so before I conclude, I want to take a special moment as we're speaking about appreciation to acknowledge, Secretary, the support of the United States, and especially through the Southern Command during our recent Hurricane Melissa experience. Over a third of the country was destroyed. And when we needed a friend to be there, the United States was there. Your very quick action, your mobilization of support saved many lives. And we want to just take this opportunity also to thank you for being a friend, not only on paper, but when we needed you, you were there. And we are here to support what your bigger purpose and vision now for this region. So in concluding, Jamaica supports the expansion of cooperation to enhance security in the Americas, and we envision enhanced security cooperation for member states on countering the scourge of organized crime. Mr. Secretary, we thank you and your team for this transformative initiative, the America's Counter Cartel Coalition, and we are happy to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Marks. Minister Abrego of Panama, you have the floor.
Sí, muy buenos días, secretario Pete Hegseth, general Frank Donovan, distinguidos colegas, autoridades y representantes de las Naciones Amigas. Es un honor dirigirme a ustedes en esta conferencia internacional, espacio que reafirma nuestra convicción de que los desafíos actuales trascienden fronteras y exigen respuestas coordinadas, estratégicas y sostenibles. La convergencia de líderes y expertos aquí presentes demuestra que compartimos una visión común: fortalecer la cooperación hemisférica, anticipar riesgos emergentes y consolidar capacidades que nos permitan enfrentar con eficacia las amenazas transnacionales que impactan nuestra estabilidad y prosperidad. Nos encontramos en un entorno estratégico dinámico, donde la seguridad es interconectada y multidimensional, por lo cual demanda mayor interoperabilidad, intercambio oportuno de información y alianzas basadas en confianza y responsabilidad compartida. Panamá reafirma su compromiso de actuar frente a los desafíos comunes del hemisferio, respaldando las iniciativas que fortalezcan la cooperación regional y contribuyan a la seguridad, la estabilidad y el desarrollo sostenible de nuestras naciones. Les invito a que este foro sea un espacio de diálogo franco, intercambio de buenas prácticas y construcción de soluciones concretas. Con mucho respeto y un espíritu de colaboración, deseo que tengamos una jornada productiva y orientada a los mejores resultados. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Minister Abrego. Minister Ramirez of Paraguay, you have the floor.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, the South Commander Frank Donovan, for convening and organizing this important meeting. Your team is quite interested in coordinating all those activities that we are developing here. Dear ministers, authorities, colleagues, really, Paraguay is here because we share principles and values. And the leadership of the United States on this issue is quite important, because those values are freedom, democracy, human rights, rule of law, and in God we trust. Paraguay appears also before this conference with a clear conviction. The fight against cartels and transnational organized crime is not only a security priority, but also an essential condition for development, democratic stability, and the prosperity of our nation. Under the leadership of President Santiago Peña, Paraguay has adopted a comprehensive and strategic approach embodied in the 2023-2028 Strategic Security Plan, which strengthens the operation capacity of the state, modernize our institution, and promote effective interagency coordination through the National Defense Council. The results are tangible. We have carried out large-scale operations, such as Operation Escudo Guaraní, disrupting drug trafficking logistic networks, seizing illicit drugs, weapons, and assets, and finally weakening the criminal organization. At the same time, we have strengthened territorial control, modernized our surveillance system, and reinforced the state's presence in vulnerable areas. Paraguay has also deepened its bilateral and regional cooperation, particularly with the United States. We approved yesterday in the Senate the SOFA agreement with the United States, and in the next week we have a law to start or restart our bilateral cooperation with the United States. But with our neighborhood is very important also our cooperation. And strategic partners recognizing that no nation can face alone threats that are transnational in nature. Coordination in intelligence sharing, joint operation, and institutional strengthening has been key to achieving effective results. We also reaffirm that security and development are inseparable. Combating organized crime requires not only operational fairness, but also investment in strong institutions, economic opportunities, and social cohesion. Paraguay remains committed to a hemispheric response grounded in shared responsibility, mutual trust, and respect for sovereignty. Only through sustained strategy and collective action we will be able to protect our society to ensure a safer future for the Americas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Ramirez. Minister Arroyo of Peru, you have the floor.
Señor Pete Hegseth, secretario de Guerra de los Estados Unidos de América. Señor General Francis Donovan, comandante del Comando Sur de los Estados Unidos de América. Señora y señores ministros de Defensa de los diferentes países de América. Señoras y señores miembros de diferentes delegaciones de los países de América. Damas y caballeros, tengan todos ustedes muy buenos días. Es un honor para mí dirigirme a todos ustedes y expresar que el Perú agradece la invitación de los Estados Unidos de América para participar en esta primera conferencia de las Américas sobre la lucha contra los cárteles. Mi país reconoce y valora esta importante iniciativa que contribuirá a reforzar la cooperación regional para afrontar de manera coordinada las amenazas actuales que comprometen la seguridad, la estabilidad y el desarrollo del hemisferio americano. El Perú prioriza la sólida relación que mantiene con los Estados Unidos en materia de seguridad y defensa, prioridad que día a día se fortalece. El Perú está firmemente comprometido con la lucha contra el crimen organizado transnacional, un fenómeno de naturaleza compleja y multidimensional, el narcotráfico, el narcoterrorismo, el tráfico ilícito de armas, la trata de personas, la minería ilegal y la ciberdelincuencia operan mediante estructuras que trascienden fronteras, utilizan tecnologías emergentes y buscan debilitar la institucionalidad democrática. Estas amenazas proyectan simultáneamente en los dominios terrestre, marítimo, aéreo y cibernético, lo que exige respuestas integrales y coordinadas. Para el Perú, la lucha contra el narcotráfico constituye una prioridad estratégica. Como uno de los principales productores mundiales de hoja de coca y cocaína, enfrentamos de manera directa el impacto de estas economías ilícitas sobre la seguridad pública, el medio ambiente y las poblaciones más vulnerables. Nuestra experiencia histórica ha demostrado además la estrecha vinculación entre el narcotráfico y el financiamiento del terrorismo. De igual manera, reconocemos que la ciberdelincuencia constituye una amenaza transnacional que solo puede enfrentarse mediante una cooperación sostenida y mecanismos internacionales eficaces. El Perú ha participado activamente en la negociación y suscripción de las convenciones de las Naciones Unidas contra la ciberdelincuencia, reafirmando su compromiso con la prevención, investigación y sanción de estas conductas. así como con el fortalecimiento de los mecanismos de cooperación internacional frente a las amenazas digitales emergentes. Frente a este entorno estratégico, la seguridad hemisférica exige mayores niveles de interoperabilidad, intercambio oportuno de información, modernización de capacidades y una cooperación basada en la confianza mutua y el respeto a la soberanía de los Estados. Para terminar, decirles que el Perú reafirma su compromiso con una acción coordinada y solidaria que permita preservar la estabilidad regional y garantizar un hemisferio más seguro y próspero para nuestras naciones. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Minister Arroyo. Minister Sturridge of Trinidad and Tobago, you have the floor.
Thank you. Secretary Hegseth, General Donovan, thank you. I would first like to bring greetings from the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, and to thank you for the invitation you have extended to us to attend this Counter Cartel Conference. We appreciate the solemnity of the occasion and we are grateful for it. For many years, Trinidad and Tobago's geopolitical position was a blessing as a gateway connecting South America to the Caribbean and beyond. But that blessing has become a burden, as in recent times we found ourselves at the mercy of powerful drug cartels and criminal networks engaged in narco-trafficking, firearms trafficking, and human trafficking. Trinidad and Tobago stands with the United States and our partners in confronting these cartels and transnational criminal organizations in our neck of the woods. We are not observers in this fight. We are on the front line with you. We have lost law enforcement officers in this fight, including one of our sailors during the interception of a semi-submersible which was transporting a couple tons of cocaine. We have lost thousands of citizens over the last 2 decades to violent crime, fueled mainly by the actions of the new narco-terror networks. But our economic fortunes have changed, subjecting us to severe structural constraints which hinder us from delivering the appropriate level of border security needed. Because we once classified as high income earning, and because of our GDP, that classification turns out to now be strategically misleading and thus limits our ability to access critical security assistance, donations of equipment, and other resources. This at a time when our borders are critically exposed, leaving us at a critical disadvantage as we face off with sophisticated and well-financed narco-traffickers who move their goods northwards into your neighborhoods and onto your streets, into your homes, and bringing destruction to your youth. If we are to deliver effectively as the security anchor in the Southern Caribbean, we require assets that would equip us with the capability to disrupt the cartels in the transshipment corridors and to protect our shared economic interests in the energy sector. Every shipment intercepted in our waters is one that would never reach your streets. Again, permit me to underscore our commitment that we stand ready. Our personnel are highly trained and our doctrine aligns with yours. We require assets in the interim that would enhance our maritime domain awareness, as well as enable us to carry out targeted reinforcement that would serve both our interests and would deliver immediate hemispheric benefits. Our government is dedicated and ready to shoulder our responsibility, and once proportionally equipped to the expectations placed upon us, we will deliver results. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Sturge. At this time, Secretary Hegseth invites all heads of delegation to join him at the table for the signing of the Joint Security Declaration.
Everybody? All right. I'm the only one that needed to sign because everyone else already has. So here you have it. It's America's Counter Cartel Conference Joint Security Declaration, affirming our relationships, respecting sovereignty, recognizing the strategic importance of this hemisphere, and declaring our intent to expand multilateral and bilateral cooperation to enhance security in the hemisphere, to cooperate on whole-of-government efforts on border security, countering narco-terrorism and trafficking, securing critical infrastructure, and other areas to be determined, advancing peace through strength, as was so eloquently said by so many speakers here. It means something to address future threats to our mutual interest and join together to combat narco-terrorism and other shared threats in the Western Hemisphere. Signed March 5th, the year of our Lord 2026, in English and Spanish. How about that? Thank you.
We will now have a 10-minute break. Breakout sessions will begin promptly at 11:15. Secretary Hegseth will first host Caribbean nations on the first floor in room 136. Central American and South American nations will begin with counter-narcotics and cyber breakout discussions